Cool. No, I feel like this is such great info. Everybody on the planet needs to hear this stuff. And hey, y'all online. As always, if y'all have questions, you can just put it in the little question box, and then I'll try to hit it at the end, and we will go from there. All right, so this is being recorded. So, all right, so today's talk's great. Elimination diets. We should be out of here within 30 minutes, so relatively shorter talk. This is also part of the flexible animal-based omnivore that we've been covering for the past month, and but it's really a separate topic in and of itself. So we will talk about our new goals for our last week of the flexible animal-based omnivore as we get through this. But thank you guys so much for coming. It's going to be good info, all right? This is stuff I wish I would have known 10 years ago. Let's take a moment real quick, and let's just do a few deep breaths together so we can come present and just be here and absorb this info. So all I'm going to ask you to do, just keep your eyes open. We're going to do 3 deep breaths. Deep breath in. On the exhale, as you breathe out, I just want you to listen to what we have going on here. All right. So we got some people talking. It's fine. It's just noise. Let's just listen and become present. All right. So 3 deep breaths. Deep breath in. And exhale. Again, deep breath in. And exhale. And nice deep breath in. Exhale. All right, cool. You can do that anywhere, anytime. Completely changes your day. All right, so today we're talking about introduction or elimination diets. And if you join us for our master class at the first of the year, which we do every year, usually it's pretty massive. Were you here for this one this past year? Yeah, so last year was like 120 people in here for the kickoff. This year we had about 80, I think. So it's usually a really big class. And our goal with that 8-week master class is to give everyone the basics and foundations of what they need to master real food for life. And the reason we're doing this is because we want to be healthy and happy and we want to feel good, right? Why the hell are we trying to figure this stuff out? Because we want to feel good, right? So in that class, we talk about these different steps that we all go through. The first step that we all go through is learning how to choose foods made with the correct ingredients. You understand what I mean by that? What do I mean by that, Diane? Can you help me out? What do I mean by the first step is always choosing foods made with the right ingredients.
No sugar, no processed foods, what's coming to mind.
Yeah, so it's like the first step is like choosing things made with appropriate ingredients, right? So if I want an ice cream, I want to choose an ice cream that's made with wholesome ingredients versus like something that's made with some junk and some shitty oils, right? So the first step in our way of doing things is to transition from the wrong ingredients to the right ingredients. Then our second step is being 100% fresh raw foodies, meaning that we all know about like the Siete chips and the Jackson's Honest potato chips and the Justin's peanut butter cups and the Strauss's ice cream. And what we found is we went through this experiment years ago where we said, hey, what if we just give all that up and we just do fresh real food? Like we just 100%, like we're prepping all our food at home. We did that for a few months and that was the big game changer. So this is the level that we want everyone to be at some point is just being a real foodie. And then every now and then maybe you have a taco night, you use some Siete tortillas or something like that, but you're not doing that stuff all the time, right? Because again, if we want, I think all of us want the same thing. We want to be healthy. We want optimal body composition. We want to feel good and look good, right? So it's like, to do that, if I'm having Siete tortillas every night, it's probably not helping me serve my goals. But it's fine because it's made with the right ingredients, right? So the second step is being a real foodie. Third step is we have to acknowledge the importance of always tinkering with a low-carb phase because carbohydrates are a problem for everyone, including the people in the SHT community, because we just tend to overdo it. Everybody does. Then the veteran step in this is always going without something. What do I mean by always going without something? Anybody?
Sacrificing something here and there. It's like going without fruit for a week or going without vegetables for a week or something.
Beer, exactly.
3 weeks out of the month.
You don't want to mention
3 weeks out of the month.
So sacrificing might be a harsh term, but I understand what you're saying. So what we're saying is we always want, there should never be, depending on what your goals are. Some people are just happy doing their thing and that's it, right? But if you want to constantly improve, then there should never be a time that you're not experimenting with having something out of the deal. so that you can see how you feel, so that you can bring it back in and then see how you feel, right? I'm always in an experiment. I don't care like what it is. I'll find something, right? So this is what this is all about, really. And then, of course, we're always incorporating fasting protocols into what we do. So let's talk about what is an elimination diet. Do we know what an elimination diet is? Have you heard that term?
Yeah, I've heard the term, but I don't know exactly what. I have an
What does it sound
have an
like?
idea. Like
Removing something
Yeah.
from your diet.
That's it.
no sugar, no carbs, whatever.
It's what we just said. It's removing something deliberately, right? So when you look at any diet, okay, any diet or methodology by definition is an elimination diet because there's things that because they're a diet, they're not doing. So a vegan diet is eliminating meats. A carnivore diet is eliminating plants. And then there's the whole spectrum in between. There's the SHT, right? We're kind of an elimination diet because we eliminate processed food and what we consider not real food. But so everything is really an elimination diet. But typically, you're going to do an elimination diet because you want to see something change or you want to keep things interesting, right? So the basics of it would be that you would acknowledge what it is that you want to see change and how you're measuring progress, right? So maybe you're using your psoriasis, that's like, I just want to see if this moves a little bit, and that's my motivation for doing this thing. And then you want to remove your suspect nutrient or food group for a specified period of time. Now, we recommend, first of all, any period of time is going to be beneficial for the purposes of doing it, right? I think it's an accomplishment for anyone to go a week without cream in their coffee if they're used to it. Like, I just can't even fathom not having cream in my coffee, but I have to do it every now and then, So, but for the purposes of really seeing what effect it has on your body, we recommend a minimum of 2 weeks, ideally 4 weeks. And if you're in a really optimal scenario, 90 days is the time that it would take for your antibodies to completely reset themselves because you have a half-life with the IgG antibody, which is about 21 days. Half-life means it takes 21 days for half of those antibodies to dissipate from your system, which means it takes a full 90 days. So let's say that you have a gluten intolerance and you don't know it, right? Or sensitivity. Well, it's going to take 90 days to completely clear from the system so that you can be sure that it's out. Although most of us would notice a benefit within days, weeks, maybe a shorter time period than that. And it's not saying that if you do anything less than 90, it's not beneficial. You're going to see resolution for most people, within days, but it's still what's ideal is hitting that 90-day mark. But we usually teach in our classes minimum 2 weeks, ideally 4 weeks or a month, right? Then you're looking for changes, symptoms to change or improvements. So as you pull this thing out, maybe you have some emotional suffering, but you're looking for something to shift, right? And maybe it does or maybe it doesn't, right? Then you're going to reintroduce that food with awareness and maybe using some testing protocols and also look for something to change and shift, right? And it makes things very interesting, very fascinating. All right, so why do an elimination diet? I think we've kind of already touched on it. First of all, we want to see what works for us as individuals, right? So the purpose of an elimination diet is to take something out, see how it responds, bring it back in after your body's had a chance to be cleaned and see how you respond. Also, something that's a motto in all of our classes is we have to prove to ourselves that we can go without something that we think we can't go without. So there was a realization that we had early on, I think it was around 2012 or something like that, that if there's something in my mind that I'm like, there's no way that I can give that up, then you have to give it up. Because our ultimate goal with real food and life in general is to experience a level of freedom, especially with food that's like, I know that I can go without that if I have to, even though I may not like it. I used to drink every single night of my life, like as long as I can remember. And it transitioned from 2 bottles of wine a night to when I got into everything that I'm doing now, it's like a drink or 2 a night. And at some point, I was like, I can't fathom not doing this. This is my relaxation. I come home, 5 o'clock in the evening, I crack open some wine. And I had that realization that I have to conquer this because otherwise I'm ruled by this. And sure enough, like now, that's my default. I don't drink every week, and I have a drink here and there, and I have fun with it. But my point here is that if there's something, you could probably pinpoint it right now. If there's something that's in your life or in your diet or in your habits that you feel like you cannot give up, that's probably something in the back of your mind that you want to say, at some point I have to give that up so that I can prove to myself that I can. All right? And then it always keeps things fresh and exciting. And then it helps you get in touch with your body. So a lot of people have lost this innate intelligence and this sensitivity to how things make them feel. And once you start to pull things out and bring them back in, you start to have this awareness like, wow, I didn't know this was messing with me like that. I didn't know that I would respond like that. All right. So another reason would be we're all very bio-individual, and I have worked with, seriously, like I say hundreds in my private office, probably bordering on 1,000 now. We've had thousands go through the group SHT classes. And I see people do really well on like high meat, high carb, low carb, high veggies, low veggies. And that also shifts over a person's lifetime. So I remember early on, in my first few years of tinkering with this, I felt like I did really good on the high plant matter way of eating, right? And now I feel like meat is my thing. And maybe it's because my system adapted and evolved. Maybe it's because I kept tinkering. I don't know what it is, but we have to keep messing with things so that we can always be fine-tuning. All right, so when it comes to elimination diets, our basic framework is already pretty clean. All right, so this is our definition of food. We've all been through this before. Yeah, you guys were in my office. We went through the basics of it, right? So this is a nutrient-based way of eating, plus we allow some carbs, a little bit of dairy. The way that we structure our meals with our ideal day's meals, no carbs in the morning, spacing between meals, a little bit of carbs at night from real food sources. This gives us nutrient density, it gives us metabolic flexibility and fat burning. And by definition, this is a very good real food way of eating, right? We're very proud of it, very flexible. But within this, there could be a lot of potential problems. And that's why we want to experiment a little bit. All right. The flexible animal-based omnivore is even cleaner. All right. This is our carnivore experiment that we renamed flexible animal-based omnivore because we're doing a little bit different. All right. So this is our food pyramid. The base of it's mainly animal meats and fats and some superfoods. And we have some this is what's flexible about it. We allow plants and some other indulgences to make this work in a modern lifestyle. So this is even cleaner than the basic SHT protocol. And if you went 100% animal-based, I'd say that is the cleanest that you could possibly be. Have any of us here ever done any of those allergy sensitivity tests? Okay. Most people have. All right, so when you see those, when they come back, the majority of the problems in there are from plants and seeds. And because if you have something that comes back and says you have a problem with meat, you got a big problem because you are meat, right? That's having a problem with yourself, and that's a clear indication of an autoimmunity, right? But the majority of those tests come back and it's plant-based. It's all kinds of different, like you need to avoid avocados, and avoid certain seeds. Sometimes you'll see eggs. We'll talk about eggs. Eggs is one of the things that we recommend eliminating, even though it is animal-based, right? So anyway, in our animal-based, flexible animal-based onboard progression, we talked about the spectrum. Nutrients from animal-based foods are going to be way more bioavailable, way more nutrient-dense. Plant-based foods, they're fine, but not anywhere near as powerful as the animal-based ones. And then energy coming from animal-based sources and some plant-based starches and fruits and sugars and things is going to be optimal versus some things that are maybe a little bit more difficult for your body to digest and use, right? So the first step is always starting with eliminating processed food and getting to the point where you're a real foodie, right? So that's what we just talked about earlier, right? We want to start choosing things made with the right ingredients, and then at some point move towards being a fresh real foodie, meaning the majority of what I eat is meat, vegetables, fat, a little bit of starch, a little bit of fruit, maybe a little bit of full fat dairy, if I tolerate it, all right? Any questions on that level? This is what we should be striving for. If you get to this point, you're going to feel so great it's not even funny, right? Right? Am I right? Because you don't do much of that other stuff anymore, right? Very infrequently. Yeah. And you're doing amazing. You look great. So then the next step would be experimenting. And now within this world, there's a million things that we can experiment with. But our motto, again, is we should always be going without something. At any given point in time, you've got something that you're going without. We want to make sure that we're doing that with awareness, right? What this does over time is it helps you develop a honed intuition about what's good for your body. When I first transitioned from doing the wrong thing to something real food-ish, back in 2010, I had no idea how bad I felt because I was so numb to my symptoms. I was so habituated to the way that I felt. And then once I got into what I thought was real food at the time, then all of a sudden my body started giving me signals that I didn't even know were there. And then as time went on and I kept fine-tuning things and experimenting, I got more and more in touch with the signals my body was giving. And so over time, you start to develop a very honed intuition about what's good for your body. And that happens like from meal to meal, snack to snack, week to week, month to month. It's pretty fascinating, very interesting. I can tell right now when I eat something that's off, even if it's in the real food realm, because I can just feel it in my body. I get like a little increase in pulse rate, which I can feel. My blood pressure maybe creeps up a little bit. I start a little itch in my foot where my eczema is. I get all kinds of little feedback signals. So this is what's really great about this way of doing things. And I'm remembering the podcast with Bourdain where they were talking about, or maybe it was Saladino that was talking about how they had taste receptors for, what were they saying? The nutrients in the different fruits.
Oh yeah.
All the different nutrients in the fruits. They knew which things gave them the most bang for buck just from the eating of it, or the taste of it or something like that. They could
Talked
sense it.
about too those tribes they were following. They developed a taste for the different anti-nutrients.
Yes, and which things to avoid.
Yeah.
Which ones had the most
That's blew my mind.
anti-nutrients. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's a really good podcast. I'm gonna share that with everybody. I loved it. All right, so suspect foods within our definition of real food. Let's cover what those things are, where we might want to start. Full fat dairy. Full fat dairy we love, not just because it's animal based, because we love plants too, but also full fat dairy, fat soluble nutrients. So it's a nutrient powerhouse. A lot of nutrients we're not going to get in other sources, and also it has a lot of medium chain triglycerides, which are easy to use for energy. Which means when I include full fat dairy in my way of eating, I'm giving my body nutrients. I'm helping facilitate some metabolic flexibility and some fat burn, right? Seeds and hard-shelled nuts and beans tend to be the most problematic in all the plant world because they have a lot of anti-nutrients. Eggs, egg whites, and entire eggs are something that we ideally want to pull out at some point. And I had a hard time believing this because I love eggs. And then my thought process was for a while that it's not eggs, it's egg whites that are the problem. And usually when you get some of these sensitivity reports back, it is an anti-nutrient that's in egg whites called albumin that's the problem, that sometimes gets mitigated from cooking, but not all the time. So I had some clients years ago that I was like, all right, I guess I got to do this whole no egg thing because they were doing eggs every day for breakfast. They couldn't fathom not having eggs. Sure enough, they took eggs out and some of their skin issues went away right away. Then we did some experiments where we just took egg whites out, and the majority of them saw results, but there were a few that were still sensitive to egg yolks, which blew my mind, right? So usually when people have problems with eggs, it's the egg white, but sometimes it's the yolk. So it is recommended at some point that you do go without total eggs at some point. And what we believe is the problem is it's not inherently in the yolk. It's usually from what the chicken is eating. So some GMO feed, some soybeans and things like that contain some anti-nutrients and maybe some toxins. And then nightshades like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and things like that. Right. So within the real food realm, these are things that we'd recommend. So let's just talk a little bit about seeds. The reason that seeds are so problematic is because seeds are a plant's next generation. And because plants can't run from danger, they have to protect themselves. And so what they do is they build these anti-nutrient protection mechanisms inside themselves that inhibit an animal's ability to digest them properly and also cause some other issues, right? So we have inside of plants lectins, prolamines, phytates, and saponins. Ancestral populations are very aware of this, which is why they take very strict, cautious measures when preparing foods because they want to make sure that the foods are as low in these anti-nutrients as possible. If you got a question, let me know because I see you right over there.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Shoot.
I wondered, when you said eggs was like a seed and a shell, isn't that a description of what a lectin is?
A lectin?
Lectin, yeah.
Well, a lectin is an anti-nutrient, right? So
Right.
that is sometimes in seeds and stuff. So I'm not sure
Okay.
what
But
you're
an egg, if it's pasture raised, you have the same problems that you described?
Yeah, sometimes. So that anti-nutrient is like a lectin, all right? The anti-nutrient albumin inside the egg white. So what I was saying there is look at an egg as if it's a seed. And usually with the seed, we get rid of the shell, right? And obviously with an egg, we're getting rid of the shell. But pretend that the egg white is also a shell. So what's inside is relatively a lot safer, a lot more nutrient dense, a lot easier to digest. So that's why egg yolks are like a superfood powerhouse. It's one of the first foods recommended by the Weston A. Price Foundation for babies. Very easy to digest. The white only has some amino acids, so it's not like a nutrient powerhouse. So what we're saying is just envision an egg looking like a seed, and we just want that little nut inside usually. Whites are fine if you cook it, but if you're sensitive to eggs, it's going to be usually the white, sometimes the yolk. Just something to be aware of. Yeah.
So you're better off with a free range chicken with as far as the eggs go? Because you mentioned something about
The way it eats.
the way it eats.
Yeah. So ideally, you're looking for pasture raised.
Yeah,
Right?
that's what I'm. That's
Yeah, pasture raised, because free range is kind of a very subjective term. Yeah.
oh, okay.
So, but pasture raised has some qualifications to go along with it. So pasture raised, and then within the pasture raised realm, you have organic and non-organic. So ideally, what you want is pasture raised organic, which there are some options out there like that. They're very expensive. All right. So in the seed round, we have a spectrum of seeds. And we'd say the least problematic of the seeds are going to be the hard-shell nuts, because the hard-shell nut has this very protective outer layer. And when we get rid of that outer layer, what's inside tends to be very safe, because the plant spent so much energy on that shell, right? So we find less anti-nutrients in the seed inside a hard-shell nut. Now with legumes, beans, by definition, they have a pod that is not as hard as a shell. It's a little less protective. So what we would intuit is that there's a little bit more anti-nutrients inside the seed, because it needs to protect itself a little bit more, and that's exactly what we find. So with legumes, you can't eat, I don't know any legumes that you can eat straight off the freaking vine. It make you sick. But you do have to soak them, ideally you're soaking them and cooking them for a certain period of time to mitigate those things that would make you sick. And then we have grains, which, grains by definition, usually when we're consuming them, you're including the shell and the hull and the husk, and we consider those to be the most problematic of all the different seeds. So if I had a spectrum from least problematic to most problematic, we'd say that grains are the most problematic because of the anti-nutrients, because you're consuming the shell, the bran, the hull, the husk. We think soybeans are pretty worthless, so we put them on this end of the spectrum. Least problematic are going to be hard-shell nuts with the shell removed. White rice, although considered a grain, it's like a nut with the shell removed, right? And then in the middle, we have this gray area realm, which is legumes, that if you soak them, and maybe you add an acidic medium or ferment them when you do that soaking process, you can make them more nutritious. But this whole realm here is still within a problematic realm in itself, because they all contain nutrients, right? So that's just a little background information on seeds. And again, we're talking about suspect real foods that we want to pull out, okay? Nightshades. There's over 2,000 plant species in the nightshade family, and the majority of those are inedible because they're so poisonous and toxic. But there are some that are edible, but they contain remnants of those toxic plants. And we see that in some people's sensitivities, because some people just can't handle nightshades. Pretty sure that I can. Nightshade, some of the things that we actually enjoy out of these things are the things that are problematic for us.
Is that mint?
No, it's a tobacco leaf.
Okay.
Yeah. So tobacco, nicotine, tobacco is another nightshade. And then the heat, the capsaicin that we experience from like peppers and stuff, although we enjoy it. And this is another thing that makes our flexible animal-based omnivore a little bit different, is we allow some spices and seasonings that you actually enjoy, but it is designed to be a toxin. That's why it's hot and spicy. All right. So these are the more known edible nightshades. These are the less known. We have these as a resource inside our little community site. I think we have it in those handouts, and if we don't, then it's easily accessible. So, all right. And then plants in general are something that we would at some point want to eliminate, right? We've talked about this in our previous meetings. We have our problematic plant progression. So we talked about like that spectrum of seeds, right? Within that spectrum of seeds, we have the most problematic seeds, which are grains, the least problematic, which are hard-shelled nuts. But seeds in and of themselves contain more anti-nutrients than any other plants. So we have those at the end of the spectrum, okay? Including hard-shelled nuts, okay? So hard-shelled nuts are just the best of the worst, really is what it is. Nightshades, these are things that we'd say most people would probably do better without, or at least making sure that you test for them. On the safe side, we have non-sweet fruits, our safe starches, and some squashes. In the middle, we got sweet fruits, hearty vegetables. And we think hearty vegetables would be better cooked, because cooking does mitigate some of the anti-nutrients. Cooking breaks down the fibrous walls and makes the food more digestible. But in general, we would say everything in here is worth experimenting with eliminating, right? And if you don't see something up there, that means it's kind of gray area, so you've got to figure it out. All right. Full fat dairy, I would say you got to go through an elimination phase at least one time. Right? I've done mine so many times, it's ridiculous. I don't think I have a problem with dairy. And at the same time, like I constantly put myself through phases of no dairy. But I do think it's useful to understand what's problematic about dairy, right? So when we start with milk, from milk, we get this fermentation process that converts it into different things, right? Depending on how we ferment it, we can get yogurt and cheese, and then we can take the fat off the milk only, and that is what we call cream. We can actually ferment the cream and turn it into sour cream, and then if we churn the fat, we can get butter, which is it's the majority of the milk solids. And then ghee is certified dairy-free, free of all milk solids, right? So we would say this is most problematic, to least problematic, or non-problematic right here. And what's problematic about dairy is it's very insulinogenic. I mean, it spikes blood sugar in people, even though it doesn't have a lot of sugar in it. Sometimes it does have some lactose, but we do see spikes in blood sugar. I've worn a continuous glucose monitor for a total of probably 3 months, and a lot of dairy spikes my blood sugar, but it went down pretty quick. And then also casein, lactose, and whey are things that a lot of people are very sensitive to. And then something I didn't know until I got into Paul Saladino's work is that dairy has some phytic acid in it, which is one of those anti-nutrients, right? Gluten is considered a phytic acid. And so, phytic acid, no, that's meant to be phytic. You know that I put these presentations together because you see spelling, but
Question on this,
yeah.
because I carry low butter and ghee. But the casein, it's A1 or A2. How am I supposed to know that?
Well, typically they're going to be proud of the fact that they're, what's the better one?
Two.
It's A2, right? They're going to be proud of the fact that they're A2. So they're going to list that on there.
What does that mean? A2.
It's a different type of cow.
Different cow.
Oh.
Yeah. So in general, though, so they're going to label that. They're going to be very proud of that. And I don't see that very often.
It's tough to come by.
Yeah, very tough to come by.
So when it comes to cheese,
Mhm.
I guess you just don't buy cheese that's coming from a cow unless you know it's from A2.
I'm not as concerned about A1 and A2 as I am just the food in general, right? So what we want to do is experiment in general. Because even with A2, you're going to have some people that have sensitivities. A2 is not going to be void of casein, lactose, and whey, right? It just has some different versions of those things that makes it less problematic for some people. So to us, it's not an issue of A1 versus A2. It's an issue of can you tolerate dairy or not tolerate dairy? Or within dairy, can you tolerate specific dairy products? Because I have some clients that they can do some sour cream, they can do some butter, but they can't do cream. Arnica cannot do cream. And then I have some clients that can't do any dairy. And then I have clients that do really good on dairy. So what we have, the mindset that we want is, regardless, we want to experiment with every one of these things. And ideally, you would experiment with every version of every one of these things. You know what I mean? Oh, and what we found out too is that I think it's not even cream that Arnica is sensitive to, it's the carrageenan in cream that she was consuming. And now we're in a test to try to figure that out. So, my point with this is that, first of all, if I'm experimenting with dairy, I need to experiment with every dairy product. Some dairy products probably have more potential to be problematic than others. When I'm working with private clients, what we do is we'll start on this end of the spectrum and work our way this way until we experience a sensitivity, if at all. Because usually there's more problematic factors as you go down the spectrum, but I have had people that, for whatever reason, don't do good on heavy cream, but they do tolerate some cheese or something like that. So the point here is dairy can be problematic for some people, just like plants can be problematic for some people, and we want to experiment with each one of these things. All right, cool. And then we talked about our last talk, oxalates are these metabolic waste products we actually produce internally. But we can also consume them, and they're found in really high levels in some plants. This is actually a page pulled out of Paul Saladino's book, and it just shows you some high oxalate containing foods, and it causes a lot of bad symptoms. Like if I eat spinach, it goes right through every time. I don't care if I cook it or not cook it or eat it raw in salad or what. Like it just messes with me. So oxalates is definitely something that we want to experiment with going out at some point.
Bad with turmeric, because even the MCT oil comes from turmeric.
You can find one that doesn't have turmeric in it.
Right. I
For
just
sure.
wonder what's wrong with turmeric.
So the theory that we're promoting in this flexible animal-based omnivore, and it's not something that we're saying we're married to just yet, but the theory is that the benefits that come from turmeric are from things inside of it, like curcumin, which theoretically has an anti-inflammatory effect, but it's because of the antioxidant activity that it creates inside the body. So the theory is that the supporters of it say, well, when you consume it, you get a little anti-inflammation and you have some antioxidant activity. And what the people that are advocates against it would say is, well, the reason you're having antioxidant activity is because it's a problem for the body, and the body's trying to neutralize it and get it out of the body. And so, yeah. So it's worth experimenting. That's all. That's what we're doing. I definitely, from what I've read and understand that, I would not be taking large doses for sure. Now, turmeric as an ancestral food or spice or something like that, I think it's more whole food based, so it would be perfectly fine. I'm not sure how it shows up in the MCT, but yeah. All right, so this is our 5-step process, which is very similar to what we said was how an elimination diet works, and this is where we get into our little sheets and we go through this. If we look at that first page of the handouts that we have, and I'm going to send this out in a PDF so you have it in color if you want to print out the little arrow in color. So again, our first step is starting with the minimal elimination diet is going to be eliminating processed food. We should at some point get to the point to where we don't care about it at all ever again, right? I don't know how long it took me to get there because I would have random situations where I thought I was immune to going back and I'd just show up at Pink Box Donuts and get a few donuts, like out of nowhere, But I almost not a possibility. I don't see that ever happen. All right, but anyway, our first step is eliminating processed food. Then our next step is transitioning to a real foodie. I would say before getting into any crazy experiments, you want to do like what you're doing right now, which is like you're a real foodie, like you're committed to real food, right? And you want to do that for like 2 to 6 months, because within 2 to 6 months, you're going to experience all kinds of great changes. Then you want to get into your experimentation, which is where you start to pull stuff out one thing at a time, one nutrient at a time, one food group at a time. You have your lifetime to experiment with it, so you can do that any way that you want. And then animal-based is going to be the most clean version. If you ever want to get to a clean slate, if you go 100% animal foods, then you can start reintroducing plants, you can start reintroducing dairy, you can start reintroducing all these things that might be problematic, right? So in our little worksheets, we have something. This has been great. I pulled this out of working with private clients that we're trying to pinpoint some symptomatic issues. So the first thing that you'd want to do is sit down and acknowledge the symptoms that you have. All right, so you can write in that box. You just write down what it is that you feel like you want to see change. So for me, my eczema, and sometimes I have loose stools more often than I think I should. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to choose what is the food or the nutrient or the food group that I'm going to go without, and I'll write that down. Then I want to track how many days I can go without that food. Now, we said that ideally you're doing this for 90 days. Most people don't make it to that mark. So if you're lofty and you feel like you can do that, that's awesome. What I have here is a 30-day mark, right? So ideally we're going a month without that food or nutrient, but maybe you make it a week or 2 weeks or whatever it is, right? You just want to see how many days you can string together. Now the reason this right here is very important is because if I go 13 days and then I have a beer or a sandwich, and I'm trying to eliminate gluten, I got to start all over because now my exposure has reset, and now I have to go back through that day one to try to get me to the month mark or the 90-day mark or whatever that is, right? So we want to see consecutive days all the way out to as long as we're trying to do this. You're looking for resolution of symptoms, some kind of change, something noticeable. Maybe you don't notice anything, and going as long as you can, right? Then we have a little box here. You can write down the things that you notice. Very subjective things, some symptomatic type things, some body issues. And then also we have a spot here to put down testing results. So if you do glucose testing, pulse testing, any other kind of testing, you can actually write those, right? So you can use this sheet for every symptom or issue or food that you're trying to experiment with, okay?
Because I'm a novice, and I don't have so much time to experiment with things. Is there like a cheat sheet, and it says, okay, I have this symptom, I'm overweight or diabetic, this or that. And maybe I should give up eggs or fruit, you know what I mean? So it kind of helps me to get started on eliminating the right things depending on the symptom.
Oh, okay. I do have a symptom-based assessment that we can do. I think you might have done it in the beginning.
I'm not sure if I'm smart enough to know all my symptoms.
Right. So we have a symptom-based assessment that we can go through. And then we don't have exactly what we would do to experiment, but I know from experience what things, we might want to experiment with. So let's do that for our next meeting. How about that? That'd be fun, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, I can send it out today. It takes you like 20 minutes to answer it. Yeah. So that's a really good question. Yeah. So if you don't know the symptoms, let's say you're just like, okay, well, I feel like I feel great. I'm not sure what it is. You can still go without something to see how it makes you feel. Right? So, and then maybe you feel better, or maybe something clears up that you didn't even know you had. But if you don't know, if you're struggling for what those symptoms are, you can do a symptom-based assessment. We have a really good one. Like, I love it. I kind of customize it. All right, what else? Any other questions on this little worksheet piece right here? Great questions. Cool. Now let's talk a little bit about intuitive testing and then pulse testing. So as we're bringing back in foods, and this is part of your handouts too, we want to have this awareness, right? The first step would be intuitive testing. And I love doing this, right? We're automatically kind of doing this now when we sit down to have dinner because we're doing this little life as is challenge. And we don't do music, we don't listen to books, podcasts, or anything else. We just sit, have conversation at dinner, and chew our food really well. It's really great. It's so great. I don't know if you guys do or don't do this, but I'm telling you right now, it is so great because the default when Arnie moved down here was like we'd come in and pop something on TV for background noise, and I didn't even plug in my TV for years before she came down here, and I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. I've never seen these shows, And then at some point I was like, you know what? Like I just want to know what it's like to come home and just sit at the table and not do anything. And it's the default now. It's so great. Anyway, that's a tangent. So the intuitive self-testing is you're going to prepare a food that you've been without for a little bit, right? And you're going to sit down at the table and you are going to just like get calm and relaxed. You're going to put it in your mouth, you're going to chew it and taste it, and you're just going to pay attention to how your body feels. Now, I told y'all before, if I have something that's off, a lot of times I get a pulse increase. I can sit there at the table with some hot sauce in my mouth and I can feel
You're saying immediately.
Immediately, yeah. So the goal of the intuitive testing is twofold. You're looking for immediate reactions. And it's almost like this attitude of, I'm just going to do it for curiosity, fascination, and shits and giggles. I'm going to sit here and just hold it in my mouth. Because, okay, let me back up just a second. We have inside of our mouths what is known as lingual neuroreceptors, which are these sensitivity indicators that should be able to communicate. Let's say I put something very toxic in my mouth. My body should be able to say, hey, hold up a second, this is not good for you. You need to spit it out, right? We've lost that. But a lot of indigenous populations and mountain men would super masticate leaves and stems and things to see, is this problematic for me? If their lips swelled up, they knew right away, right? If they started to cough and heave, they knew right away. But sometimes something wouldn't mess with them and they'd start to swallow it in very small amounts. So we can still tap into that. We just have to really pay attention. So what we recommend is taking a food or a nutrient or a piece of cheese or whatever that is, put it in your mouth, sit there and chew it and salivate, and then sit with it for a little bit and just see if you notice anything. Sometimes, and what we're looking for is what we have listed up here. You're looking for reactions, hot flashes or flushes, pulse increase, tiredness, digestive upset, and mood shifts without even swallowing it. We'll do this in our big groups. Like 2 years ago, we had that massive masterclass, and we did cheese, Kerrygold cheese as a test. And we had a few people that like got tired right away. Like just from holding cheese in their mouth, they're just like, man, I feel like I got to take a nap. So, and then you're looking for not just immediate reactions, because you may just sit there and not notice anything. Then you're going to just eat your food, do your thing, and then look for same day, next day reactions. Same reactions, maybe some allergic reactions, right? If something is different because of what you just did, then you have to have this, you make the connection, like, oh, maybe it is the dairy. Or it could be something else I ate in my meal. You don't know. We're trying to make this work in a modern lifestyle. So that's the first step. I think this is something we should always be doing, especially if we've gone without something for a specified period of time and we're bringing that food back in or that nutrient, whatever it is, then we want to, what's the point, of bringing it out if we're not going to pay attention to how we can bring it in? Have some fun with it, sit down at the table, sit with it, pay attention, see if you can notice anything, and then see if you notice anything same day and next day. Does that make sense? All right, cool. And then the next step, or maybe next level of difficulty, would be doing a pulse test. I have a lot of words written here for the pulse test, but the bottom line is this. And if I do 15 wall balls, does your pulse rate increase or decrease? Why? Yes. Why else?
And it's stressful.
It's a stress, okay? If I eat a food and my pulse goes from 65 beats per minute to 100 beats per minute, what do we think? It's got to be problematic. It's got to be problematic. So the pulse test basically means we sit down, take some deep breaths, 1 full minute pulse. All right, I recommend using your fingers, but if you got a device, you can do that too, right? 1 full minute resting pulse. Then you take whatever the food or nutrient is that you want to test, put it in your mouth, you chew it, you hold it in your mouth just like we would with intuitive testing. And while it's in your mouth, while you're tasting it, another full 1 minute pulse. And then you see if you have an increase. If you have an increase of 4 beats per minute or more, it's problematic. The more the increase, the more problematic it is. And I'm telling you, like in these groups, we'll have some people, nothing happens. We'll have some people, they seriously have like a 30-point jump in their pulse from having cheese in their mouth or something like that. And you could probably do the same thing with almonds and walnuts. And we've done that with our private clients, right? So it's like everything can be pulse tested. It's actually really fun. You can pulse test anything you consume, really. Now, there's some caveats to it. So if you don't see a change in your pulse from a pulse test, it does not mean that it's safe. Okay, so let's just pretend that you took some of your urine and you put it in your mouth and you held it and you didn't have a pulse increase. I still don't think that would be good for you to drink. Or if you put some gasoline in your mouth and you did not have a pulse increase, I don't think that would be safe to drink. Or some Drano.
Pass out before.
Yeah. All right. I probably should have said urine. But no matter what, like there's things you can put in your mouth, and we've seen this, right? Artificial sweeteners. Some people have a pulse increase, some people don't. So one of the caveats to the pulse test is if you don't see a reaction, that does not mean that it's safe. It means it's inconclusive. But if you do see a reaction, then for sure it's something that's problematic. Okay. So it's good to know. It's good to find problematic foods, but if things don't change, then you still have to be aware and pull it out for a little bit and see how you feel. Cool.
Are there foods that lower your pulse?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of different theories with that.
Below 90, usually 95.
Oh, you're saying so that you can be healthier, like foods that you can eat that would lower your pulse?
Right.
So I think your baseline pulse is your baseline pulse, but it may be baseline because of something that you're constantly eating. So in theory, so it's not that they would lower it, the removal of the problem might lower it. So, yeah. And everybody, the pulse, just like blood pressure, is going to be very bio-individual. Although in general, a lower pulse and a lower blood pressure is going to be considered healthier, some people just have a standard a little bit higher than others. So, what else? That was a good question, actually. Really fun stuff, you know. If you got like friends, and I'm going to try to remember to do this with Arnold's family visiting. If you got like, I got clients who have families. They sit down with the kids, like, all right, we're all going to do this together, and then everybody has a different number. They're like, wow, that's really interesting. Cool. So, and there's a really good book that goes over that info. So homework for flexible animal. Oh, go ahead.
Question.
Yeah.
So you're bringing something back in. Went clean, cleaned everything out, going to bring in whatever it might be, orange spud or something. Is there a preferred quantity that you want to deal with?
Ooh, really good question.
When I bring something in, I eat crap load.
Yes, really good question. All right, so the question is, when bringing something back in, do I need to do certain amounts?
Yeah.
All right, so I always like to think in spectrums. Let's pretend that what did you say, an orange spud?
Yeah.
What's that?
Sweet potato.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's just say that you're bringing it back in, right? But you do a toothpick size. I don't think if it's a problem, you might, unless you're super sensitive, you're probably not going to notice anything, right? So I would say like you want something significant, you know.
So eat the pint of Ben and Jerry's.
There you go. Well, okay, now let's take it to the other end of the spectrum. Okay, if you eat
the whole block
3 sweet potatoes, right, in a night, you're going to feel something bad from that because it's like a lot of carbs. You know what I mean? So it's like something reasonable. That's a very good point.
If you're German and from the Midwest, a block of cheese is like Monday.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
no big deal.
yeah.
So you
Anytime I buy cheese, the whole block's gone.
I'm talking about eliminating. Are you talking about one item, or is there several things? Like you'd have to just do one at a time, right? Or you wouldn't know.
Well, you could. So the question is, would you do one thing or several things? Because if you did several things and say you noticed something, you wouldn't know which of those several things it was, right?
Right.
So the reason I like to say is we have a lifetime to experiment, and also part of what we are in the SHT is making this work in the modern lifestyle, right? For a lot of people to do one thing or several things, it's like you have to figure out what fits your lifestyle. So if it's easier to do a group, and then if you notice something, then you know within that group, now I have to do individual experimentation. That's useful.
That makes more sense.
Yep.
You have
So-
time to do this. I mean, I feel like you want to know now.
Yeah. So like, say for instance, I wanted to do pulse testing around a meal, right? I could take my pulse before a meal. I gotta get calm and relaxed first, right? I'm sitting there chilling out, take a minute. All right, full pulse. Then I eat a meal. My meal has pork belly, some carrots, a few other things, right? And then I take my pulse after my meal. It's really high. Well, which one was it? Well, at least I know that something in that meal
Oh, yeah.
is off,
Okay. I see.
So it's like you can do several things, food groups, nutrients, it doesn't matter because we have a long time to experiment. I think the goal would be to always be doing something.
So it might make sense to start with the pulse test before and then figure out what you're going to eliminate from that.
Yep.
Probably.
Sure. Or you could just start by just going without something and being like, I'm just going to see how I feel without it,
Yeah.
Okay. Or going without a food group. Or, it's like there's a million different ways that we can do it. The mindset, I think, what I want for everyone is that we're always doing something, period.
Yeah.
I've been through my years of, before keto was even a popular term, we did 2 years of ketogenic, like me and some of my nutrition cohorts. And we had spreadsheets and we were documenting pulse rates, glucose, and like all kinds of crazy stuff. I did that with food and stuff. And I got to the point where I was exhausted and I was done with it. And I was like, I'm not going to teach this. I'm not going to teach neurosis to people. So now we're at this point, it's like, we just want eating to be intuitive. We have our basic rules, we have this framework. Within that framework, we have now some experiments that we want to do, and you can do whatever feels right for you. All right, so did I answer your question? So something reasonable, right? Now, for flexible animal-based omnivore, if you haven't been there already, which I think you are anyway, for at least a week, we're going to try 100% animal-based. So that means no plants. So last week we were allowing some fruit, some non-sweet fruit. What else were we doing? Yeah, off the top of my head. Fatty fruit like avocados and olives and stuff like that, right? So for 1 week we're doing 100% animal-based. The only things I'm giving some concessions to are butter. Oh, and no dairy, except for butter, a tad bit of cream in your coffee, and then coffee, tea, and a little bit of pepper for seasonings, although we're going to try to do just salt without pepper. So, all right. For everyone else in here, I would say just start working down that list. Your goal is, number one, choosing everything made with the right ingredients. Once you're dialed in with that, now you're moving on to being a real foodie, 100% fresh real food most of the time. Every now and then you may have a taco night with some siete chips, but that's not the default, right? Then you're working on, what's my experiment for this month or this week? What am I doing to see if I can find something for myself? Okay. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And then I just want to make a plug for our community site. It's slowly growing, slowly getting some activity. Our purpose with the SHT and specifically with this community site is we're bringing people together who for most of their lives have been lost and confused when it comes to health and nutrition, right? So there's so much information and conflicting misinformation out there. We clarify the confusion and bring confidence to our people. And we do that by learning, experimenting, supporting each other throughout the entire process because we all want to be happy and healthy. And as you all know, we've already said this before, we've got these monthly themes. So this month we've got flexible animal-based omnivore. Next month we're focusing on the outdoors. The next month we'll be focusing on how to be a smart vegan. Actually, that's just going to be one meeting, but we're still going to do it. By the way, I've got like a lot of vegans I put through my smart vegan protocol. And they've seen tremendous results. We got some gym members that they just refuse to do animal foods. And we're like, all right, that's awesome. By the way, vegan is a subset of real food. Like, we embrace it. We think it's fine. So, and then within those monthly themes, we have our weekly seminars, which is what we're here to do today. And that's going to continue on for a while. Maybe we'll have every other week seminars here coming up soon. Within that community, we have daily questions and polls to keep things really active. And so if you're not a part of that, then I'd highly recommend it. It's freaking awesome. So, any other questions or comments or feedback?
Are we going to talk about this again in like a month or something?
We can, if you want to do like a little follow-up meeting.
Yeah.
You want to do that? All right.
Or
I'll schedule
privately even. I mean, I'm just
Cool.
saying we're
Yeah.
going to.
I'll put a reminder in, and we'll say 4 Saturdays from now, we'll have like a little follow-up thing, even if it's just us. We can do it
Yeah.
after our workout.
That'll be good.
Cool. What are you going to work on? Do you know?
Well, symptoms wise, I feel like I have to take a nap every day, even if I sleep 8 hours. So
Mhm.
I don't know why. I don't do anything. I don't have kids. I don't know why I feel the need to take a nap. And I also always feel like I have food in my throat, even though I haven't eaten for 12 hours.
Mhm.
So those are the two things that I feel like are related to.
What would be the thing that you're going to tinker with first?
Hidden sugars, because I don't eat sugar or desserts really, but I don't really look at labels to see what sugars are in other things.
Mhm.
So I need to work better at eating whole foods for sure.
Yeah.
And then when I don't, salsas, things like that, I don't really look and see what's in them. So I feel like there's hidden things that I need to educate myself on for sure.
Do you mind if I give you some feedback on that?
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're bringing that up. So I think I understand what you're saying. So like say for instance the salsa, you look at the ingredient label, it says like 6 grams of sugar or something like that. I don't think that would be a problem unless it was like loaded with corn syrup or something like that, right? I think the first step would be, like you just said, just being 100% fresh real food for as long as you can. Maybe even having like a little, I have an awesome diligence tracker in my office. I don't think I gave y'all one. It's like 11 by 17. You just check every day that you're 100% fresh real food, and you're trying to get like as many days as you can in a month. And just that by itself, you may notice those things improve dramatically. And then of course, no carbs in the morning, a little bit of carbs at night, and some space in between meals. So I think the first most beneficial step would be the commitment to just like being as 100% fresh real food possible. I don't know that like a little bit of sugar, like on a package of bacon, is a problem. It's using the curing process. Sometimes with salsas, it's like part of the vegetables or fruits they use in it. So, not to say that you don't want to be meticulous about other things like soybean oil and some of the shitty oils and stuff. But,
Yeah.
so, but I do love the idea of like a commitment to fresh real food, because that's a game changer, huge game.
I don't do too bad.
Yeah, I know you don't.
It's just
I
when
know you
we go out, like those things I need to educate myself on how to eat away from home when I'm not, and we might eat too much fruit.
Yeah. Well, on the going out thing, just if you have any questions, let me know. Like I'm here to help.
Yeah.
I want to brainstorm that. You got to do the best you can when you're out. Always choosing real food, but then it's uncomfortable for some people, but like it helps to ask, like, what's this dressing made of? Where'd you get this dressing? Do you cook that in butter? Can you please cook it in butter?
Yeah, all sorts of funky oils showing up when you go out.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's the stuff I don't look at or know about.
Yeah. I started asking people to cook things in butter.
Yeah. And usually they do if you're nice about it. Now if you're like, can you cook it? If you're like that, then but if it's like,
Get the extra spit on it.
yeah,
Yeah,
you're like, can
exactly.
I please? Hey, y'all have butter? You mind cooking that butter? Trying to eat a
I
little
guess maybe
healthier.
that's actually a better way to verbalize what I'm trying to say. It's like I can sit there and eat vegetables or eat whole foods that I see, but when I actually start cooking,
Mhm.
it changes obviously whether I cook it or someone else is cooking it, and that's when I lose knowledge on what I'm eating.
Well, if you cook it, you know what you're doing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, if I'm going somewhere to someone's house or to a restaurant, or I mean, it looks like the food that I think it should be, but you don't know what else is in it.
Yeah.
That's what I don't.
And you just have to. So at a restaurant, you have to have the courage to ask, right? I don't think that you just get used to that. I don't know if it's an issue, but I know a lot of my clients are like, I'm nervous to say that. I'm like, I'm not anymore. I don't know. Maybe I was at the beginning. But you have to be very tactful, right? Because I do see people that I don't do gluten or something like that, and then they're like, okay, like they'll spit your food or something.
No, yeah.
But if you're like, if you're genuinely like, hey, I'm trying to eat healthier, I'm trying to avoid gluten. Do y'all have any, something like that? Just ask very nicely and tactfully. But it's also a plug for as often as you can eating at home, controlling what you control. Now, what's flexible about our way of eating too, what I love about the SHT is like we're trying to make this work in a modern lifestyle. So if you go to someone's house and it's a potluck, and you're just choosing the best that you can, say I'm at a little family get together with Arnie and them, I am not going to disrespect their food and be like,
I'm not eating.
Did you put this in here? I'm just going to choose the things that I want and not eat the things that I don't want. Period. I'm not going to eat the cake. Unless someone says, "Will you please eat my cake?" But I'm definitely not going to say, "Do you mind? What did you put in this?" Because like I feel like that would be rude.
They wouldn't
Yeah.
like you.
So
I think one of the key words that you mentioned quite a few times today is flexibility. And that translates to me anyway is that and experimentation. Everybody is your makeup is different than mine. Mine's different from you. So I mean, so between the flexibility and the experimentation, you got to literally find what works the best for you. So, yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Within the realm of certain guidelines, because we would say we're not flexible with processed food, soybean oil, and stuff like that.
Right.
So, there's one other thing that you said there. You were saying, I think that's what I wanted to say. Was like, when you go to other people's houses, I don't use it. I don't allow it to be a time that I'm like, oh, now's my time to eat cake and pizza because I'm not going to be rude. But what I don't do is like nitpick what they have. I just choose the meat, and even though I'm not positive the meat didn't use some kind of something seasoning in it, I'm going to do the best I can.
Mm-hmm.
Now, depending on what symptom it is that you're trying to resolve, I've got some people that are like celiac and they can't do gluten. So there is no like, well, I'm okay just kind of doing this here. It's like they got to be very scrutinizing. Sometimes bring them food. So, what else? It's a good discussion.
I have a question. I'm not doing just the animal based because I spent all this money on vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
So
Which is great.
But is fish considered meat?
Yeah.
So I can have fish.
Yep, fish, shellfish, eggs, insects, crickets, mealworms, which I got some in my office. You want some? By the way, I got some. I got some. Yeah.
Then I had a question on sugar
Uh-huh.
because I'm only eating real food. Exactly what goes in my food.
Uh-huh.
Because I gave up actually fruit. So I don't have any fructose. Do I need sugar?
I don't think you need it, but I don't think you have to force yourself not to have it. So as long as you can have it in moderated amounts. Oh, that's the thing that I didn't come back to.
I'm not eating any sugar.
Yeah. So so the goal again, like what we're trying to do here is make this work forever in a modern lifestyle, right? So what I don't want for people to have is a mindset of I can't, I get people that are like, well, I don't do sugar. Oh, that has a little bit of sugar. Well, I'm trying to make this work in my lifestyle. It's fine, right? If I'm eating, this is not directly related to your question, but I'll get to it. So if I remember Ryan Duplex is in here one day. He's like, so you do barbecue sauce, huh? I was like, yeah, I'll do some barbecue sauce. He's like, what about the sugar? I'm like, dude, seriously? If you and I ate identical meals for a month, but I had a tablespoon of barbecue sauce with my evening meal and you did not, do you think you're going to notice a difference in how you look, feel, and perform? No. I mean, it's so minuscule, right? So my point there is, it's like we want to make this work in the modern lifestyle. I would not have a mindset of I have to go without it, unless you just want to as an experiment where you're fine with it. But I think most people enjoy having a little bit of something sweet, here and there. So if you're going to do sweet, I think fruit's great. It's fine. Does that answer your question? I don't think you need sugar.
My body doesn't need sugar.
Yeah, you don't need sugar, but you don't have to force yourself not to have sugar, because the goal is not to not have sugar. The goal is to eat real food according to our rule. Nutrients, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of carbs measured out, right? As long as you're strategic with the carbohydrates, you can't go wrong. Small amounts, and later in the day. So.
I think what happened was I read that plant paradox.
Mm-hmm.
As far as he was concerned, fruit was candy and candy was bad.
Yeah.
So,
But again, if we look at the spectrum thing, right? So I would agree, like fruit is the real food version of a dessert. But if I have a half an apple with my evening meal, right, or after my evening meal, and everything else I've done in the day is real food, is that half an apple going to derail anything? No, it's not. You know what I mean? Now, if I have a bag of apples, or if I have 5 apples in a day, like that could be a problem. So it's like in a way it's moderation, but not the moderation that you hear mainstream conventional wisdom talk about, like everything in moderation. You can have your cake and eat it too. Within the real food realm, the carbohydrates need to be moderate. That's it. But you can have them. They're beneficial, small amounts. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Because Gundry and there's a whole movement against like fructose and stuff. Yeah, no, I would say just fine. Have some fruit. Perfectly fine. And it's all worth an experiment too. So if you're dead set on trying to figure out like is it really that bad or not, go a month with no fruit, and then go a month with like a half an apple or something like that, and see if you notice anything. Probably won't, but maybe you do. Great question.
So I can eat.
Yeah, yeah. Because I know what it's like, right? So people a lot of times starting out, they're like, I'm not starting out because you can do it a little bit, but it's like you want to do everything right. So it's like, oh, if this is a problem, I want to get rid of it. And we hear so much against sugar, and sugar is a problem, but not the way that we're doing it for real food.
Yeah, have sugar in the wine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool. Anything else? All right. Well, thank y'all so much for being here today.